Welcome to another episode of the Turn Autism Around podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Barbera. Today, we are talking with Lisa Houseworth, who is a mom to a son with autism, but she's also been a behavior analyst in the field for over 20 years. And she runs a website, shares lots of videos of her adorable 3-year-old son named Kruz with a K. That website is cruisingwithkruz.com. Today on the show, we talk about the differences between birth to 3 services, 3 to 5 services, school age services. We talk about home versus ABA programming, home versus school ABA programming, and how to make some of these difficult decisions when it's time for your child to transition on to the next phase of their education. So it's a great little episode. Hope you love it as much as I do. Let's get to it. Okay, Lisa, it is so great to have you here. Thanks for joining us today.
I am honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so Lisa has been out pretty publicly on social media with a cruising with Kruz. So cruising like being on a ship cruising, and then
Yep.
Kruz is Kruz.
Yep.
And that's her little boy with autism. But before she had a child with autism, Lisa was is an expert in ABA and verbal behavior and all the things. So why don't you very briefly tell our listeners and me about your fall into the professional world of autism, and then we'll pivot into your fall into the personal world of autism.
Sure. So in 2001, when I was in college, I found a job doing ABA with a young child with autism. And I have been in the field since 2001, so a really long time. So I became a board certified assistant behavior analyst in 2006 and a BCBA, board certified behavior analyst, in 2010. Somewhere along there, I also graduated from law school. So I really like analytical thinking. And now my husband and I own a small business providing behavior analysis services. And I'm also an adjunct faculty. So I've been doing this for a really long time. I have 3 kids, and my youngest was diagnosed with autism. So, profession by choice, and then jumped into this parent role of an autism mom. Um,
Yeah. So Kruz. So the other thing I know that you didn't mention is your husband's also a BCBA.
my husband is also a BCBA, so lucky for our kids that ABA is part of daily life here.
Yeah. And you have 2 older. So what are your kids' ages?
So I have a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old, and then my youngest is almost 3,
Okay.
um, and my youngest is diagnosed with autism.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you first notice signs? Because you're a behavior analyst, so you're probably well aware of signs.
Yeah.
When did you
So when
describe
Kruz
that a little bit?
Yeah. So when Cruz turned a year old, we noticed that he wasn't talking, like he wasn't really making any intentional sounds, and he wasn't doing a lot of gesturing towards things that he wanted, or like communicating in any way, like reaching his hands up if he wanted to be picked up. He also wasn't clapping, and he wasn't really dancing to music. So we had early intervention come out, do an evaluation. He qualified, but everybody said, "Oh, he's just a late talker," because he had really good and has always had really good play skills and eye contact. Fast forward about 6 or 7 months, and Cruz demonstrated a pretty significant regression. At that point, we did have a little bit of communication. He was waving bye bye. He was saying more, and a few other things. We lost those words. And he also started demonstrating some pretty significant self injury. He was headbanging. He was demonstrating severe tantrums lasting an hour and a half. He had up to 5 tantrums a day, which they were very long and very intense, and that was really hard. So fortunately, we were able to get him in for a diagnosis pretty quickly, and We were also able to start ABA pretty quickly too, which has been amazing for him and for our family. So I share on Cruising with Kruz our journey because I'm really passionate about helping families understand the science of behavior analysis and maybe dispelling some myths and maybe sharing like a real life example of what play-based intervention looks like. So
Right. Play-based, but very behavioral too.
behavioral, yes.
And
Yes.
that's where, we actually met a long, long time ago,
Yes.
but when I saw you starting to share some of these videos, I mean, very much in line with what I share, especially the videos with my online toddler course are,
Yes.
videos of little kids, happy kids. Um, there's not like drilling or calling things work or we don't show problem behaviors online, and really my whole goal is just to get rid of problem behaviors, but through intervention that boosts all the good stuff. And so when we met originally months ago, I had offered you to take a look at my toddler course, and so you were able to do that.
Yeah, so I loved the toddler course that's available online. And my favorite part, even though I am a professional and I've been doing this since 2001, my favorite part of the course was seeing the videos. In so many professional development opportunities that are available, procedures or protocols might be described, but they're not shown in real life, like what this actually looks like. And even though I've been doing this a long time, it's still really nice to see, like, okay, this works with other kids. And, just being able to have some hope of, we can make progress. We can do this, and parents can do this. This is not super technical. You don't need to be wealthy. You don't need to have a huge house. This is doable. It's manageable for mamas to jump in and help their little ones.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really been my goal, like through the Turn Autism Around book and through my toddler course, they go hand in hand. And, somebody said to me, like a marketer that's not in the autism world, well, don't put too much in your book, because you want people to join your course. I'm like, hey, if somebody from Idaho can take my book and they have a professional potentially helping them, and they can also read the book, and you guys can put a positive spin on whatever you're doing and more systems in place like I'm showing, like God bless them. There are too many people that need good intervention. So, I worked hard to make my book step by step, but also to make my course, and I revised the course to make it better because we were like, well, we don't want this, $15 book being better than the online course. And I think the online course is really helpful because of the videos and the like step-by-step approach. Like, okay,
Yeah,
take a language sample, set the timer for 15 minutes. It's easy enough to do, and they don't have to know shaping, chaining, extinction.
sure,
They don't have to know those terms, multiple
sure.
control and all the things that you and I both know because you did, you know, you did some training or worked at the Carbone Clinic, and
Yep,
you
I
had
did.
mentors along the way that were my mentors in some way too.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And so many professionals, whether I think well-intentioned, but sometimes are want parents to be more involved, and I think that there are parents who want to be more involved in their child's intervention, but they just don't know what to do and they don't know what to ask. And so it's hard to say we want parents more involved, but then we're not giving them tools for them to actively participate. And so I think this course is great even for those parents or those families who do have outside professionals and intervention for their child, like still take the course so that you can participate and you can ask the right questions and be a valuable part of that intervention for your child.
Yeah. So you and your husband own a business, and do you provide early intervention, school age programs, or what do you provide?
Yeah, through our small business, it's called Key Behavior Services. We provide intervention from early intervention all the way through young adulthood. We primarily provide services that are home based or community based. So we go into some schools and provide services. We do not run a center based program. So all of our services are pushed into the client's environment, wherever that is. And so, yes, we do provide early intervention services from as early as a child is able to access a diagnosis all the way through young adult services.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And that's great too, is like, because you're not going to do this, you're not going to really dig in and help your child or clients enough with 15 minutes a day or 1 hour a week of
Yeah.
services. So you are going to have to find local people
Yep.
who are willing and able to come in because I mean, Kruz, like how many hours of service does he get? And he's just turned.
Yeah. So he started services in home in January of 2023. And so for most of 2023, he received about 25 hours a week of services, give or take an hour or two here or there. And then in between those services, both my husband and I are doing the best that we can to interact with him and keep him engaged and play with him and, do that natural environment teaching. And we're just really intentional with our time. Now we do have two older kids, so that's part of the reality of being a parent. So we have to, go to baseball games and soccer games and the whole nine yards. So we're not perfect parents, but we did have help, and we still do have help in our home for about 25 hours a week with Kruz. So
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's mostly during the week, I'm
yes.
imagining. And
Yep.
so that's like 5 hours a day. Like when
Yep.
Lucas was little, he did 40 hours a week. So that's
Yep.
8 hours a day,
Yep.
5 days a week. And people are like, oh, I don't, that's too much. And in a lot of ways it is too much, especially for the really little kids who still nap, who still need, a half an hour to eat. Um, so so I like the idea of 25 hours. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with this article that just came out in October of
I
2023.
yes, with recovering kids or whatever we're calling it at
Well,
this
it's
point.
persistence of autism spectrum disorder from early childhood through school age. I did
I
a
know it's a sensitive
podcast
topic.
summary
Yep.
of this article um, in
Yeah.
in a solo show. Did you get to listen to that
I
or?
did listen to that actually, and it's really fascinating data that they're putting out. And that's a question that I get asked all the time. And I don't want to offend anybody by wording because I know that recovering kids or curing kids or saying that kids no longer qualify for an autism diagnosis is
Right.
a sensitive topic. And I don't want
Right.
to, offend anybody. And I think you even mentioned in your podcast as far as adults who say that they would never get rid of their autism characteristics, and so I don't want to offend anybody. And what I my response to that for Kruz is I don't know if he will have autism forever. Likely, yes. My intention with early intervention is to improve his quality of life.
Mhm.
And I want to give him the skills to have autonomy, to be able to make decisions for his own life and tell us what he wants to do and what he likes and what his preferences are. When we started this journey a year ago, he had zero language and he was tantruming for hours a day. And that's not a great quality of life. He didn't
Mhm.
have language. He didn't understand a lot of what other people said to him. And for Kruz, that early intervention has given him some autonomy. He is talking a lot more. We still have a ways to go with communication and conversational speech, but that's my goal for Kruz. I don't know,
Mhm.
if we're going to lose that label or have whatever the wording is in that article, non-persistent
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Well, one of the things in that article, and like you can listen to the whole thing, and actually, the summary of the article is an episode, and I did email that to the first author, my summary podcast, and she responded like within a day or two and said it was spot
oh,
on. Thank you for helping her disseminate. But what was interesting, that's why I brought it up, is because 25 versus 40 hours or
Sure.
versus 1 hour of treatment is in the article, in the study of 213 kids, the only two variables that were significant for the non-persistent ASD were female sex. Like 22 of the 36 girls in the study, pretty much didn't qualify for a diagnosis, and good baseline adaptive skills. But these families were mostly white, mostly college educated moms.
Sure.
And I do think that other studies have shown, especially the education and commitment of the mom, correlated. They didn't find that, but their population was a little skewed towards that.
Sure.
But it's an interesting study, and I know, in the early days, I got, fell into the autism world with Lucas's diagnosis in 99. He started showing signs in 98. The whole ABA, that was the goal, non-persistent ASD, although that's the new term for me. Um, but with such a little guy and him doing so much better, you've got to get those kind of questions. Hey, it's Mary. I'm breaking in real quick. If you want to be like Lisa here, who took the toddler course, there's the toddler or the school age course, can really help both parents and professionals. I would suggest you attend a 1 hour free workshop to see if it's a good fit for you. And I'm pretty sure it might be. So marybarbera.com/workshop to attend that free 1 hour workshop. Let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, we get those questions all the time. So, and I have a blog, so it's www.cruisingwithkruz. The cruising is with a C, and then his name is with a K. So I have videos of him from diagnosis to now, and so anyone can look and see video clips of where he was at the beginning of 2023 to now, and how he's progressing through his intervention, and he's doing really phenomenal. He is speaking in phrases, sometimes in sentences. He's even sometimes making jokes, which is just so funny. Sometimes they're not funny, but he thinks that they're funny. Like what are you eating for lunch? And he's obviously eating tacos, and he'll be like, I'm eating chicken nuggets. And I'm like, no, you're not. And he just laughs hysterically. Like he knows that he's being
Yeah,
funny,
yeah, yeah,
and if somebody would have told me that a year ago that that's where we would be, I would have been like, no way, Jose.
yeah,
But we're putting the work in, and I know every child's journey is different, and I don't want to minimize anybody's journey because I know that everybody has a different journey. But I think sharing videos is really helpful for people who don't have the professional background that I have, because it can show people like, look, we're just intentional with playing, and we're really trying to keep him engaged as much as we can. There's no special, degree, or you don't need millions of dollars to do this. So
yeah, yeah. And people say, oh, does they need 10 hours, 20 hours, 40 hours a week? Actually, kids need to be engaged during most of their waking hours, which is about 100 hours a week.
yeah,
And that feels very overwhelming. So, you know, it's it's easy to get overwhelmed, but I think through like Lisa's work, watching her videos, my resources, books, courses, podcasts, we show you, easier things to do, like the
right.
1 word x3 strategy. You can use that at the table, in the bathtub, at the grocery store. When it's time to open the door, open, open, and the child repeats or says, up, open, you said it, yay. Using easy techniques across those hours, to engage your child is really key.
Yeah. So when we first started with Kruz's intervention, when he turned a year old, I had mentioned previously that he was receiving services through our early intervention. It was 30 minutes every other week. And we did that for I don't know, 7, 8 months-ish, until we were 8 months probably, until we were able to get the ABA program in place. So I don't know if you want to talk about like the early intervention versus.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know that we've talked enough about it, but in the United States, and we do have listeners from all over the world, but we're going
Sure,
to specifically talk about the United States. There is
sure.
the birth to three program bucket code in the law that requires birth to three versus 3 to 5. And so it's a tricky situation when you turn three. So let's talk about that. And you're more of
Yeah.
an expert
So it
on
is
that.
tricky. And I think that this is also something that's really confusing for families who have never gone through this process, because you have this early intervention services, and the early intervention is through an IFSP, an individual family service program, and that's for birth to three. And that is very much family and child driven, where professionals are supposed to come in and work with the whole family or work with the parents and the child. And I know services in different states vary place to place, but we received a half an hour every other week. And then we were offered a little bit more than that after we did receive the autism diagnosis, but I think it was still like a half an hour once a week or, something like that. And that's just not enough for us.
Any
Well, okay,
child with if a child qualifies for any kind of delay, a half an hour a week is like spitting in the wind. I
it's
mean,
not enough. So you have, but the IFSP is a formal legal document that, the state has identified this child has deficits or delays that need some intervention. And so then I think where it's a little bit confusing is you have this IFSP that documents what services your child is receiving and goals. And then your child turns three and everything changes, because then you move from early intervention to your local education system. And so then you have to go through another evaluation to qualify for that IEP, that individual education program. So you no longer have the IFSP because that's just from birth to three. And then you qualify for the IEP, the individual education program, which serves ages 3 through their 22nd birthday, assuming that they still meet qualifications to have an IEP. So we're going through that process right now with Kruz. We're in that transition from early intervention to the school district, the IEP, and it's hard knowing, what is the right thing to do for Kruz and what do we want those services to look like.
yeah. And the other thing is that the IFSP and birth to three services are almost always in the home
Yes.
or daycare.
Yes.
If the child goes to daycare full time, they'll push in there and maybe do a little bit after work and after daycare, but those are the primary. And then, so the services come to you. It's very much parent involvement, like mandated involvement. Like you
Yes.
can't sit there and watch TV while the OT is there. Like that's just not, I mean, I'm sure people do, but
Sure.
the way it's written is like the parent and the child need to be there and available
Sure.
and
Sure.
working towards the goals.
Yeah.
But then when you get to three, on your third birthday, so Lucas was diagnosed the day before he was three.
Oh,
He
wow.
only had speech therapy on his IFSP, but I didn't know how it would work. And then somebody told me that was working with him, well, if I were you, I wouldn't wait until he turns three and start the evaluation because it's like months down the line. I would start to ask for more of a multidisciplinary evaluation because it was looking like this was more than a speech delay.
Yeah.
And so it got really complicated because
Yeah.
we were trying to transition from speech to everything. And so that everything coming to a head on the actual third birthday, like your funding streams change. And in Pennsylvania, you go from birth to three to school age to
Yep.
another agency and then to the school district. So it's also confusing.
Yeah.
Um, but the IEPs but those transitions are really critical. They're
They're
critical
they're critical and
legally,
they're
they're critical for the family.
Yeah. And they're confusing to navigate unless you have connections or you understand the process. And so like that's part of what that education piece that we're hoping to do with Cruising with Cruz is just to give people tools. And so for us, so we have early intervention services, and then we connected with the district about 2 months before his third birthday. And we've taken Cruz into the local district twice for evaluation. So that evaluation for the IEP, we met with a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, a school psych, and the special ed coordinator. And so they each did their own assessment with Cruz. And the purpose of that is to determine whether he qualifies for the IEP. And I anticipate that he will qualify. And so then once we do the evaluation, they'll write up the IEP, assuming he qualifies, and then we will be eligible to send Cruz to our public preschool. But there are other options, and I think that that's really important for parents to know that just because your public preschool is an option doesn't mean that that's the option that you have to choose for your child. Now, services look different in different places, and if public preschool is what is ideal for your child, then that's fantastic. But I think it's important for parents to know like there are other options than your public preschool, and you, as the parent, have to advocate for what that looks like for your child and what is going to be the best place to receive services for your child.
Because right now, Cruz gets ABA 25 hours a week, but that's paid for by insurance, I'm imagining.
So that's paid for a combination of insurance and our state's early intervention
Okay.
program.
Okay.
And so then when he turns 3, we'll lose that early intervention program. So we can still bill insurance, but then we could then use the public preschool in addition to that.
Right. Right.
So
So that
for
makes it complicated too.
it does. It makes it complicated and it's confusing. And as well-intentioned as many professionals are who work in school districts, they just don't know. They don't know what the options are because they work at the district and that's what they know. And so families don't always get access to that information. So for Cruz, we could continue to do just ABA like we are currently doing 25 hours a week. We could increase services. We could also look at sending him to a center-based program for him to receive ABA at a center. There are some centers locally that are phenomenal, and that's great. We could also do a combination of preschool and ABA, which is actually what we're hoping to do for Cruz. And I understand that these decisions have to be made on an individual basis. And I'm not criticizing anybody who makes other decisions because I have worked professionally with many families over the years. Sometimes this is a really hard decision to know the best place to meet your child's needs. So Cruz is talking a lot more, and he actually is showing an interest in his peers. So we used with our ABA team a tool called the VB map, and I
Mhm.
guessing you've
Yep.
done some
Yep.
podcasts on the VB map to show
We had
us.
Mark Sundberg on years ago, but
Yeah,
yeah, my BB bundle course really is very much in tune with the BB map.
yeah. So we used the VB map for Cruz, and that kind of gave us some data on like where he's at and what he still needs to work on. And the team basically all agreed that he is going to be ready for preschool next. We're probably his birthday's in March, so it seems kind of silly to start with 6 weeks left in the school year. So we're probably next school year going to start part day in preschool and then part day ABA. And I'm really excited for him to have the opportunity to be around peers because I think for Cruz, that's a really good next step for him because he is talking more and he is showing an interest in peers. He is starting to imitate some peers naturally without prompting, which is huge. So I'm really excited for him to have the combination of both preschool and
And
a.
will you send him to typically developing preschool?
So that's another good point. Okay, so within preschool, there are private preschool programs that mostly serve students without special needs. They serve mostly neurotypical students. And then there are public preschools, which I know different public preschools have different setups, but a lot of public preschools have a combination of kids with special needs and neurotypical peers. And then I'm sure that there's daycares that also do preschool. There's lots of different options. For Kruz, our goal is to send him to a private preschool program, which is primarily kids who are typical or who do not have special needs. I'm not against our public preschool program. I'm sure that they offer a fantastic program, but at least here, preschool is an eclectic program, which has one teacher, one or two paraprofessionals for 12 to 16 kids.
Yeah.
And half of those kids, at least in where I live, half of those kids have special needs. So that's a really huge ratio.
And
Um,
some of them have significant needs and problem
yes,
behaviors
yes,
and need really one-to-one. Sometimes they get one-to-ones, but and Lucas always went to a private preschool too. He went when he was 2 by himself before we knew he had autism. And so we just kept him back. Um, and then he went with an ABA therapist who would
yep,
come to our home, do ABA. And so there's just so many different combinations. And I did do a podcast that's pretty popular on this subject of school versus home ABA and like
yep,
how to visit a program and
yep,
see if it might even be appropriate. I mean, a couple things to look for are like people positive, our kids look happy. Like this doesn't have to be, you know, what data are they keeping? Although data is
sure,
important.
sure.
And one of the reasons that Lucas didn't transition and stay at the public preschool when he's between 3 and 5 is because we could get insurance at the time even to pay for ABA. ABA is proven where eclectic, isn't. And also in the eclectic program, there was like 15-minute block a week of teacher time, one-to-one. Like these kids need a lot of one-to-one engagement in
Yeah.
order to make the
And
kind of gains that Kruz has.
yeah, and my favorite is, and we haven't had the meeting yet, so I don't even know what they're going to offer for Kruz. But my favorite is your child is eligible for 20 minutes a week of speech therapy in the classroom with the other kids. And I'm like, what is that going to do? That's going to do nothing. Like there's 16 kids in the room, and you're going to come in for 20 minutes a week. Like that's
Push in, yeah.
yeah, I mean, so we just want to tailor a program to Cruz's needs, and that's what we're going to do. And so we have the option to send him to a private preschool. We're working on all these details and logistics, so maybe we can circle back in a year and see how that public pre or private preschool is going. But that's our goal, is to have one of our behavior techs who work with Kruz at home also go to the preschool with him, so that they can work on some of the same skills that they're working on at home, and also be there for behavioral needs, because Kruz, although his behavior has improved tremendously, he still does have some rigidity issues and insistence with same issues. And so they can have a plan set up just for Kruz, and they can work on some of those skills in the preschool setting and at home. So that's what we're hoping. That's what we're hoping to do. So
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a good plan, but as you said, very individualized. Also in chapter 7 of Turn Autism Around is a whole chapter on social skills, how to work with preschools, daycares, some kids, you know, and I've worked with a ton of kids
sure.
individually. Now don't work with kids individually. I work on, online courses and stuff. But when I did work, like there was this one little child, I talk about him in my book, and mom was like hell bent on, he needs socialization. I'm going to put him in, we'll do the ABA and stuff Monday through Friday. Or I think the kid was even going to the public preschool when I started, and but they had Fridays off. So Friday was his daycare day. And so I was just starting like to evaluate him. I evaluated him at the special needs preschool. I evaluated him on a Friday. No support. The
Yeah.
child wasn't talking. And it was like the child was just roaming around. I was just there to evaluate him. And at one point, he licked the wall.
Yeah.
And so don't think that just putting your child in a daycare or in a preschool is going to, the socialness is going to rub off. Like kids like Kruz or like Lucas need a lot of individualized one-to-one work in order to progress to the point where they're ready for preschool, sometimes with a support person there all the time. But don't just think social, I'll put them with, because that
Right.
rarely ends well.
Well, it doesn't. And when you think about the characteristics of autism, one of the three primary characteristics is that it's a social disorder. Well, if they were already imitating their peers and learning from their peers, they probably wouldn't have qualified for an autism diagnosis. So just because you throw them in that environment doesn't mean they're going to learn from that environment without it being facilitated. But that's part of the reason also that I mentioned us using the VB map as a guide or as a tool, because if Cruz in which we still have several months before he would start in preschool, but if Cruz would still need that intensive early intervention, we would absolutely continue that. But the data is showing that he is learning, and has a pretty big vocabulary, and he is showing interest in peers. And so from using that tool, we as a team feel like he's ready for that next step of being with his peers. So
Yeah, sounds like, and especially because you're not talking on his third birthday. You're talking about a whole spring, a whole summer, and by
yes,
September he should be in much better shape,
yes,
whatever that looks like. And it doesn't mean that if he still has deficits, he can't go. It's
right,
just he might need more support. And so I think very much in line with what I'm thinking. So
yeah,
so you can find Lisa on cruisingwithcruz.com. We're going to link everything in the show notes. She's also on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, as are we. We're on all those platforms, plus YouTube, which many of you are probably listening to. So, follow us. We'll link everything in the show notes. And also, don't just follow us. Leave comments, share,
yeah.
like it does well for the algorithm
Yeah.
to get things spinning, because even though I am reaching millions of people with my podcast and videos, there's so many more millions that we need to reach. And
Yeah,
so
and feel free to send me a message too, or like
yeah.
comment questions. I do the best that I can to answer questions because I really want people to have access to tools to help their children. So,
Yeah. So before I let you go, Lisa, I think this is great information. Part of my podcast goals are not to just help the kids, but also
sure.
help the parents and professionals be less stressed. So since you're a parent and professional, what are your self-care tips and stress management tools that you will recommend?
So, any parent on here, whether you have a child with a disability or not, whether you are a professional who works in the field and you have children, you can probably identify with the fact that finding balance in life is challenging, especially when you are working with a high needs population or you have a child at home who has more needs than another child. My biggest tip, number one, is to recognize that you cannot do everything for everyone and still meet everyone's needs. So you have to give yourself oxygen. You have to take a breather, and you have to find ways to prioritize other people in your life and other things in your life. And this is something that I have had to, and I still make a conscientious effort. Like, we do have two other boys in our house. And even though Cruz's therapy has been intense and we are really intentional with spending time with him, we also have to be really intentional with spending time with our other kids. And I, as a mama, have to be intentional with saying, I have to go to Target. I don't need anything from Target, but I have to get out of the house for a few
I
minutes.
will find things at Target.
Yeah, I mean, of course, right? Target speaks to us, right? We don't go to Target with a list. Target tells us what we need, right? But the point is that we have to be able to say, like, I have to get out of the house, or I have to get out of, I have to lock myself in the bedroom. Last night I watched a movie for the first time in I don't know how long. And that's good. That's healthy for me. That's healthy for everybody in my family. So acknowledge that, balance is important, and then, find ways to prioritize other people and other things and yourself.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think this was great. I'm excited to continue to see the
Yeah.
news of Kruz and continuing to collaborate with you to,
Yeah.
spread the word that and show the world what good ABA looks like. So good luck. I'm sure you'll do well. I'm sure Kruz is going to continue to cruise, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you so much.